Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the NorthNet Library System, welcome and thank you for attending today's panel discussion on libraries and wildfire preparedness. My name is Jackie Brinkley and I am the system coordinator for the NorthNet Library System. The session today is being recorded. Unless you are presenting, please stay on mute and turn off your video camera at this time. The link to the recording will be posted to the project website and sent to all participants for sharing with those who were unable to attend today. I want to extend a special thank you to our panel presenters, John Hott with the Sonoma County Library, Irma Morales with Camarillo Public Library, and Sarah Solis with San Diego County Library. This project was supported in whole or in part by the U.S. Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provision of the Library Services and Technology Act, administered in California by the State Librarian. It's my pleasure to now introduce our panel moderator and retired Napa County Library Director, Dennis Kremeyer. Dennis?
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And I would just like to take a moment to honor all those that we've lost, the homes that are gone, the livelihoods that have been affected, and the wildlife and the habitat that has been lost. We've all gone through a lot this year, so I just want to take that moment. Thank you. And I think now Susan.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm Susan Clark at Common Knowledge. And Common Knowledge, my colleague William Cooley is project manager for this project we're very pleased to be doing with the NorthNet Library System. And in this Recovering Together project, Jackie Brinkley and I had an experience last fall where we listened to Dennis and also Sarah Solis and Irma Morales and others on a California Library Association conference panel talk about their shared experiences and the hard-earned wisdom that library leaders have gained from disasters. It's just so powerful to have that exchange. So what we're going to do is do a check-in right now on the recent experiences of the people on this call. And we saw who signed up, people across the state, which is very exciting. And then we're going to have William tell you about the project that NorthNet Library System has done collaboratively to increase their preparedness and the insights that have come out of a year and a half now of work. And then the main event, right there in the middle, is the panel discussion with the people that Jackie introduced. They'll be introduced to more detail later. And then time permitting, the group questions and comments, and a chance for you all to reflect on how, as a California library community, you want to go forward together on future preparedness efforts. So that's how we're going to spend. We've packed a lot into the next hour. But let's start by checking in on how has your community been affected by recent wildfires. Here we are in another record wildfire year, some of us more directly impacted than others. And I think Jackie's going to bring up a poll and we can look together at the poll questions.
Susan, I apologize, the poll disappeared.
You know what, that's okay. What we can do is just have people put a comment into the chat. And the idea was you might have had a wildfire in your community. You might have had patrons from a neighboring community, you know, just all kinds of different things. We were just interested because this primary focus of this panel is about experiences with wildfires. We were just curious about how you've experienced that. So you could put some, thank you. Anthony from Napa, boy, he has some direct experience, and others. So yes, please just populate the chat with that. And while you do that, I can go to the next slide. And here is just a snapshot from August. So here's been this extraordinary year of wildfire activity around the state. And so many of you have been directly impacted. And we've had so here's a record wildfire season on top of past records. But of course, this year, you're doing it all in the context of COVID-19. How do you respond and serve your organization and your community in the midst of a pandemic. So we're all impacted a little bit differently. And yet the extraordinary thing is watching and learning about how libraries all over the state, and the ones we get to work more closely with in the NorthNet library system, are adapting. And you're finding new ways to deliver services, support your communities. Some of you are doing very direct emergency response support, some indirect, and helping the community's physical health, mental health. And at the same time, this is the building the plane while you're flying it. So you might say, we're too busy coping right now. Why would we actually stop and talk about it? But this is the very moment while you're reacting and figuring out how to do this is the time to stop and share together what you're learning. So we had a second poll question that might not have been loaded, but the idea on the second poll question was simply to ask, how prepared do you feel? And there's many different aspects of preparedness. You might have a plan, you might have a committee, you might have community collaboration set. And that's really the point of our discussion today, that maybe nobody feels completely prepared for these unknowns. Who could have prepared for the pandemic? But what are you learning in the midst of doing it? And so, yeah, but just take a moment and put into the chat. I really appreciate people doing that. How prepared do you feel to respond to the next disaster? Right, so we're seeing some of you feel partially, a little, somewhat, and I'm not hearing anybody say, yeah, we got this 100% covered, because it's not that kind of activity. Sarah's smiling. So I think what we'd like to do next is understand, it's no surprise, why are we here together? Why have 80 fabulous people chosen to take a precious hour together? To really keep learning together how to do this. And so we're going to have William Cooley give a snapshot of the amazing work that the NorthNet library system has done on this topic.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you all for adding your comments to the chat. Please feel free to continue adding those throughout. And part of why this is such a key issue for NorthNet is that as a region, this is a map showing NorthNet's region, which represents 41 member libraries across 29 counties. And the region that NorthNet represents in Northern California has, for a long time, experienced major wildfires, but those have only continued to intensify in recent years. As we see with the 2020 fire season, in many ways, a preview of what's likely to come, that wildfires are not going away, that they're actually likely to intensify in the future. And so for NorthNet, the idea of wildfire preparedness is one that's very intimate. And coming out of a really devastating fire season in 2017 and 2018, NorthNet's leadership had a conversation about the desire to kind of bring folks together to improve preparedness on more of a region-wide basis. And so for the past year and a half, NLS has been leading this region-wide preparedness effort that we've called Recovering Together. And the projects have had three primary goals, which are to share insights so that there's greater exchange between libraries, that libraries are not in isolation as they engage in the planning efforts, to try to build and increase connections between library staff members, so both at the director level and with teams individually, and also to improve access to recovery resources and tools. And looking across kind of the library landscape, there have been many disaster preparedness tools for different organizations, some for libraries, but none that were really oriented around the unique needs around wildfire preparedness and some of the unique needs we face here on the West Coast, especially earthquakes. And so NorthNet embarked on this project a year and a half ago, conducted a survey, which you see here, a copy of here, heard from almost 150 different library staff members and volunteers, community stakeholders, about what their preparedness levels were, what their concerns and questions were. And so since then, NorthNet's launched a new preparedness website, which is at libraryrecovery.org. We encourage you to go there and check everything out. The website features blog posts, articles sharing library experiences, planning resources, downloadable handouts that folks can use to orient their preparedness efforts. And we really encourage you to not only visit the site, but also add your own contributions. NorthNet's also launched a region-wide buddy system, which is a really low-cost effort and something that we would like to see, I think, regions throughout the entire state implement. And what it focuses on is building those relationships between libraries to offer peer support, planning assistance, and then help in the case of a disaster, so that there's already a relationship there, that you have people within the network who understand the landscape. They know a little bit also about the regional politics, regional challenges. They can help libraries navigate things like their city or county hierarchy, develop better relationships with community partners, share resources, and really engage in more of a collaborative planning effort. ahead of a disaster. NorthNet's also launched a disaster preparedness cohort. So currently working with 10 libraries throughout the region. These are the libraries right here. And what the cohort is doing is working to either improve existing disaster plans, which is what the majority of teams are doing, or develop a plan from scratch. And so through this process, one thing I would share is that for the cohort libraries, there's been a real common realization. And we saw some of that in the chat just now, so thank you all for sharing, which is no one feels, as Susan said, like they've got it down. Preparedness and preparation for disaster is something that is continually evolving. And recent fire seasons have shown that libraries with even what they felt like were solid plans had to be adjusted. COVID-19 has also required libraries to really adjust their thinking about service delivery. And so it's an evolving and a continually changing environment. And so we want to be mindful of that as we think about our own plans. To that end, Recovering Together as a project has yielded many insights. So conducted lots of interviews with library leaders throughout the state and the region, and really kind of distilled down some key learnings which we wanted to share with all of you. And so those were the needs to plan and prepare. But there's been a shift away from planning for compliance, which is the common way of doing things. A lot of plans libraries had shared were created to satisfy city or county requirements. And there's a desire to shift away from that compliance more toward community preparedness. Later, John may also talk about the concept of community resilience. And that's something that's on the minds of a lot of libraries, because it's of course not just affecting the library, but the entire community. And then also in this way, plans should help libraries think about how they're going to prepare. So providing that roadmap for not only what the library will do during a disaster or during the recovery phase, but how they'll prepare ahead of time and work with staff members in the community. There's also been a desire to see plans that, as we say, go beyond the binder. So that means not just being on the shelf in a binder, but considering larger and kind of more central themes like library culture, the way staff members interact with each other, the way staff members interact with the community, understanding sort of the values and the guiding principles behind the library's work during a disaster, plans that think about relationships, so both at that city, county level, as well as with community partners. And then plans that also that build in and think about how to engage the community. So both in the planning process, during response and recovery. And some of the libraries that we're going to see today, and some of the folks that will share during the panel, will have some examples of that. You see here even some images. These are from Tehama County. This, of course, was pre-pandemic, but they brought community members together to make cards, so thank you cards, for firefighters and first responders after their fire in 2018. And other libraries have done similar things to kind of highlight and emphasize community sharing after a disaster. We've also heard the need to make preparedness more of a shared responsibility. So too often we heard that planning had fallen on a small number of people or even one person, like an emergency coordinator. And so staff members, as a result, had not had a lot of awareness about what their planning efforts included or what they were supposed to do during a disaster. And so as an aspiration, we've said that all staff members and volunteers should have a better understanding of what their role is during disaster. And opportunity, of course, to also engage as a team to talk about this ahead of time. If your library were to do anything around disaster preparedness, having a conversation as a staff about how you would want to respond, the values that are important to you during recovery, those are the things that we found are most meaningful. And then lastly, we've heard the need to build on recent experiences. So when we started this project, it was of course before COVID-19. And since then, libraries have been incorporating just a great deal of learning into their planning processes. So things that they're doing around service delivery, things that are around online programming, moving to contactless pickup or curbside. These are all things that libraries will continue to hopefully leverage in the coming years. And that we need to take a minute to pause and make sure it's captured in the planning process, because a lot of the existing disaster plans did not include some of the recent innovations that libraries have been developing. And from here, I'll turn it back over to Danis.
All right, so now we're going to get to hear from our fabulous panel and all their experience, unfortunately, that they have this experience. I'm also going to ask Jackie to help me track time. We've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to ask a question, but maybe each of you just give a 1 to 2 minute answer, and Jackie's going to help me keep us on track because there's such great information out there that we want to hear it all and learn from you. So I'm going to start with our first question to all of the panel. So tell me, how has your library's approach to the approach to wildfire preparedness changed over the past few years, and what have you learned? And John, why don't we start with you? How's your approach changed?
Sure, Dennis, thanks. So I'm John Haupt with Sonoma County Library. And yeah, at some point you're going to see a map that I drew on with the various fires that we've experienced since 2017, and the little stars on the map showing where the library buildings are. In 2017 with the Tubbs and the Nuns fires, oh, there you go. We were effectively knocked out for a few weeks. Our emergency preparedness to that time had really centered around just trying to keep people safe in a direct emergency in the building. Like the building itself is on fire and there are people in it and we need to get them out. And not so much on a community-wide emergency, and we just weren't prepared. I'd say the biggest problem that we had at that time was that our network pipeline was burned to a crisp at one point in that fire, and that result means we had no internet or no phones, and actually had to establish on the fly a whole new network package with another company. And so communication was just a terrible situation there. 2019, we had really improved our communication situation and the protocols so that we could get information directly from admin down to frontline staff and volunteers. We were able to open a few branches almost right away. And, even though some of the branches that were directly impacted by evacuation notices, that was chaotic for many days still. And then in 2020, we were able to keep essentially just the branches that were directly affected by mandatory evacuation and the extreme smoke situation as well. Those were the only ones to close. And of course, our services were limited already because of the pandemic. As far as biggest thing to know, we talk about the 3 modes of crisis mode, recovery, normal modes. In a decent situation, it seems like you would be working on all of this in the normal mode. You would kind of learn from what you experienced, and then we're in normal mode. We got to get ready, but what happens when you never get to normal? And that's the biggest thing, I think, is that we go from crisis to recovery and then back into crisis. And I think we just need to admit the importance of preparation and actually devote staff resources to that end, not just a committee or a side project for someone who's primarily focused on public services, but like really focus on it and get it done.
Well, thank you, John. That's so important because we are constantly going from incident to incident, and there's never going to be the perfect time. So Irma, can you please tell us about how your library has changed its approach, and what do you think we need to know?
Okay, so when this first happened in 2017 for the Thomas Fire, I was overseeing a branch, and it was actually 4 libraries in the city. And I think the helpful thing was because I was with a county system that we were able to, when we lost electricity, lost service at a few of our city libraries in Ventura, there was the possibility to send staff to other libraries and help out. I do also agree with John that I think it's really important that I think quite often libraries understand the plans that you need for your library if it's burning. But it was time to sort of get a further insights to what the city, county, and when you work for a county library system, there are different cities that you have to work with, which is something our director did. But it was important for us to understand that at our level, at each level for each city, what was going on, because as you probably know, the fire went from sort of Santa Paula, which isn't part of our system, but it went through Ventura, and then it was going through like Ojai up to Santa Barbara. So it was affecting the different parts of our library system. And with that, we were sort of making it up as we went along. I mean, we sort of knew about how to deal with things. And also things like not having internet, electricity at the branch that I was at for a week or even longer. The lack of air quality because we were in a branch that doesn't have air conditioning. So there's all those things that are particular to each individual location that I think you have to, even though you create these emergency plans that are countywide, there are things that each library has to be aware of. And I think that's, I think a lot of it is after this happened, we decided it was time to rethink what was going on and really get back to trying to figure it all out. But as we say, we all feel unprepared.
Yeah, well, thank you, Irma. And Sarah, so how has your library's approach changed, and what's a good tip you want us to know?
Might help if I unmute myself. So I'm the facilities manager for county libraries. We have 33 branches. There's about 380,000 square feet. Myself and our assistant facilities manager are responsible for. So our approach is typically fairly different than other library systems because we do have our facility team who is focused just on that building component. So for us, we have a very, very strong partnership with our utilities. So down here, we have San Diego Gas and Electric. We have worked very hard to put ourselves at the table. So when we know fire season is coming, the importance of being there and saying, hey, as a second response, we're here, we're ready, we're prepared. We're following along, we're sharing information, with that branch. We're focusing on, getting information to the director. In our situation, we've actually taken the step of installing generators in our backcountry branches. We have 7 branches that are out in rural areas. And we know every year at fire season, 1 to all of those branches are going to be potentially affected. So we just had the Valley Fire and, it was sitting right between a pocket of our 5 rural branches. Coincidentally, because of that, we lose power. They do the red flag where they shut down power, and we had generators. So we were able to support our community and still be there when nothing else was open. There was no other power and nowhere else for people to go. I think it's really important, I'm hearing a lot of, who is that person who's speaking for your library? It's not just that one person that says, hey, everybody, we need to have a plan. It needs to be, if it's a municipality, who is that person? Is that your fire authority? Is that your sheriff? For us down here in San Diego, it's our Office of Emergency Services that's calling the shots as soon as we've got a fire that breaks out. So, as the facilities manager, I'm also the LAC liaison. So basically what that means is, as soon as it gets close to wildfire season, our utilities people, we're already talking to them. We've got a plan. We're figuring out what we're doing. SDG&E reached out to myself and our assistant facilities manager very early in the season, and we discussed what changes were going to be made because of COVID. So, in the past, we've had community resource centers at various branches that are close to areas that are potential wildfire areas. And we already knew we're doing a drive-through, and what does that require? Do we need bathrooms? Do we need generators? Do we need power? How are we doing social distancing? How are we setting up our parking lot? So it's really important to have those relationships already built in. So, a month, 2 months before wildfire season is coming, you guys are already at the table discussing, hey, what are we doing this year? Where are we watching? Our utilities people have cameras all over our backcountry. So they're watching, they're making sure they're telling us, hey, keep an eye on this particular area. We're seeing, Santa Ana winds and potential, red flag weather patterns. And at that point, we know, hey, we need to loop in our branch. We're letting the director know, and we're standing by literally at a moment's notice, 24 hours a day during fire season, to be ready to say, what do we need to do to support our community? So
that's great. Thank you, Sarah. And you kind of lead us right into the next question, which is great. Earlier in the meeting, we also talked about the importance from learning from other disaster responses, and you pointed on that. So our next question, how can we leverage what we're learning from COVID-19 to help us prepare for wildfires, particularly as it relates to changes in service delivery, communications, et cetera? And we'll start back with John again on that one. Just a quick 1 or 2 minutes on that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, communication wise, I just really hope that by now, with the pandemic situation, that every library system has a pretty good way of getting in touch with everyone when they're not available. But if not, I would say now is the time, get that sorted out, build it into your HR information system. Because, you need to be able to access people from their personal information. In terms of service delivery, I would just say, this awful experience of having to try to navigate this pandemic world, it has that silver lining of being a striking opportunity to try out some different service models. And I'm actually very encouraged by the creativity I've seen among my fellow staff members in terms of their, experimentation with new ways of connecting with people personally. I really hope that we can hold on to those things we learned. So down the road, when we have another disaster, it's like when we go into crisis mode, we have something to turn to that we've already learned. And same with after the event. It says something interesting about what we're looking for in terms of, that creativity and willingness to give things a try, even when you face a far from ideal situation. So I just say, the idea of an ideal librarian seems to fit that pretty well, but that might play into what we're looking for in new people.
Thank you so much, John. Irma, I'm curious to hear what you have to say. What can you leverage? What are you learning?
I think the importance for sure is communication and knowing how to get in contact with your staff, how to make sure that you can leverage the information you have about your community, how you can get emails out to them and have them know what's going on. I think a lot of it is the need for communication and just getting the information out, because we're still getting questions, even though we have things on our website about are you open and things like that. So sometimes, is using all the now we have all the social media that we can, and using all the different ways that you can communicate, whether it's signs on the door, just doing those things that I think are really important. And service delivery it's exactly that. It's pivoting to something that maybe you never thought you would be able to do or could do, and doing things that are just different than you've done before. And that's what librarians are good at doing.
That's what we do.
Reinventing ourselves, but also understanding that we're not alone. There are lots of people in the community out there willing to help us. And that's when, and sort of understand our importance in the community. And, we're doing curbside right now. Sometimes we have days where we're having 200 people picking up their items, and they're just telling us how happy they are with being able to, connect with us. And so I think that's the important thing, is the communication and sort of the human element that this is all about.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, do you have anything to add? Just a quick minute so we can get on to some.
Yeah, just really
one big thing.
I'll take what John and Irma said and put together. So with COVID, we did have to put together an LAC for that Valley Fire and really had to adapt. I mean, we typically stick a LAC in a community room or in, one piece of the library. And with COVID, it was like we threw that all out the window and we said, here you go. You can have all 19,000 square feet of this branch. And, we just put our elbows into it and figured it out. We worked with our, CAL FIRE folks, our emergency services, and just adapted and made it work so that we could still support the community in that way.
Thank you. And in LAC, that's a local assistance center. So
Yeah.
just to let everybody know, if when you're in the EOC, you are just surrounded by acronyms. So now we're going to go into some one-on-one. For Irma, I'm going to start with you. During the 2017 Thomas Fire, you and other members of the Ventura County Library were able to provide services despite countywide evacuations and library closures. What guidance would you have for libraries who might want to provide alternate services or locations during a disaster?
I think the most important thing we learned was we went to a Red Cross disaster evacuation site, and we couldn't just walk in the door. So there was lots of things we had to have done ahead of time. And so we sort of learned that unfortunately bureaucracy is still there, and in a good way and a bad way, but there was things that we could do. And we could go and help at the evacuation site, but we just had to have sort of done our homework ahead of time. And after this all happened, I looked on the Red Cross website and they talked about how you can volunteer. So just knowing that you want to help, but you have to know how to help, that sometimes it's just not as easy as showing up. We had a mobile education van at that time. That was before the county had gotten their bookmobile, but we decided we were going down there. The mobile education site or van would normally have books that you could check out, but we also asked our friends to give us books that we could give away. So when we went to the fairgrounds and the evacuation site, we were able to just put books out there. We wanted to do story time, but there was also people already there helping with those types of things. So I think a lot of it is just kind of, I think there's a knee-jerk reaction to go and try to help, but sometimes you have to kind of understand like what kind of help is needed. And maybe quite often reaching out to city or county folks, they can help you with that information.
That is really great to understand that there's so many people working on it that you need to work together so that you're not doubling down, so to speak. Thank you, Irma, for that. We're going to move on to John now. So John, Sonoma County has faced 3 challenging fire seasons, and I know because I'm your next door neighbor, your fire seasons are our fire seasons. Could you tell us about what the county has encouraged community-wide preparedness? I know Sonoma County is doing some amazing things.
Yeah, this is another thing that I'd just say, not just the library has changed a lot in our approach with the county as well. And, so going back to 2017, that was just such an event that no one was ready for. And I would say the major events that we had after that fire were excellent, but they were very recovery oriented. Like, you'd see Sonoma Strong, and they'd try to kind of establish camaraderie and try to just help people feel better after this event has happened. And they were very effective at that, actually. And I would say that was incredibly important. That said, take the Kincaid fire in 2019, and we'd kind of gotten that down, but we were still totally flat-footed as far as a community, other than maybe some improvements to the text messaging and so forth. The community itself wasn't ready, and we had these mass evacuations. If you look at the map here, it's like the 2019 Kincaid kind of starts to approach Windsor, but really everything from Windsor to the ocean was evacuated one night, and that was just a difficult thing to figure out. And so after that fire, I felt there was a dramatic shift in terms of the county's approach. There were major events. This is another one of those recovery events from Healdsburg that the library participated in. But we had a large-scale event at our fairgrounds with go bag giveaways and fire trucks and community resources, including the library, just providing information about preparedness. And then the county directly contacted Sonoma County Library, the Office of Emergency Preparedness of our county. We're a JPA, by the way, so we're not actually part of the county or the cities. And so that was kind of an exciting big deal for us to be contacted about participating in a series of community preparedness events. They can bring people to the library to learn about one of the main topics, information and community support, developing an evacuation plan, putting together emergency kits and go bags for different kind of situations. And we had, again, examples and giveaways. This was going really well until we had the shelter in place. So, you see kind of the last ones here around March 16th or so. And then, we had to put these on hold, and they were planned out throughout the year. That's a bummer. And I'm sure we're working on trying to get them set up in a virtual setting, but so I'm sure we'll make that happen. But it was exciting to get contacted in that way. Another thing William mentioned earlier about resilience and resilience hubs, and I've noted a lot of North Bay and other area organizations working on just trying to help change our approach so that we're focusing on resilience in our communities. I'd highly recommend books like this book from the ALA Library Futures series on resilience, just to get an idea of what is meant by that, and just get involved with different organizations that are all working really towards the same goal.
Well, great. Thank you, John. Now I'm going to turn to Sarah. So the San Diego County Library has also played a major role in wildlife recovery over the past 4 years by hosting local assistance centers at the branches. Can you tell us more about the role the library played and how you coordinated with your county agencies to provide that support?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really focus on being that second response. The libraries are such a central part of the community. It just makes sense to be the host for that local assistance center. So we are already established as, hey, if we're going to open a local assistance center, if it's in San Diego, it's going to be hosted at a San Diego County Library. So as the facility manager, I'm thinking about what size do we need, how many people are coming, I'm coordinating with our Office of Emergency Services as far as who are they bringing, what agencies. So we see, USPS, insurance companies, Red Cross, planning agencies, our local assessor. So, people who have lost everything, pretty much everything they need to rebuild is all there for them at that local assistance center. Like Dana said earlier, unfortunately, we've done this so many times that now, we've got it down. We can get a local assistance center set up in one day. It used to take days. Now it's like, we've all seen each other. We know each other's faces. We come together. This time was interesting because of COVID. So there was a lot of wayfinding that we needed. There was a lot of signage. We had to get a PPE push from Red Cross. We have ample space. Luckily for us, because we have 380,000 square feet to choose from, we chose the Rancho San Diego Library, which is, close to where the fire was. And as you can see from this picture, we utilized every inch of this library so that there was plenty of social distancing. We used lots of wayfinding and kept people going, one flow of traffic. It's really important before you get to this point that who is calling the shots. So that's why I was mentioning earlier, who is your library advocate? When you have an emergency, know who it is. Who's that person so that who to contact. And somebody in the comment section said, we didn't know we weren't prepared.
Yeah.
That's
so true.
Comment. So, now's the time, figure out who that person is. And Ben wrote a comment, I'm sorry, it's somewhere in there, but it was really good. Basically, The library is an integral part of that second response for communities to rebuild. It's up to us to put ourselves at the table and say, hey, libraries is here, we're ready to help out. You know, we've got XYZ library, come here, come set up, and we do what we do, which is help our communities and provide information and just be a gathering spot for these people who have lost everything.
Thank you, Sarah. So important. Now this is for everyone on our panel, for all three of you, and we've often heard, and you've touched, I think every single one of you have touched on this already. We've heard that relationships and partnerships are important aspects of preparedness for before wildfire. Just give us a 1-minute answer on what advice do you have for libraries that are looking to engage staff, volunteers, and community partners in the planning process. So, hey, Irma, let's start with you.
So really quickly, just make sure that you add emergency preparedness to every level of meetings that you have, whether it's staff, it's admin, get your board to talk about it every time, get your friends of the library, and even your professional library groups. And the second thing is to make sure ahead of time on your social media that you like county, city, different agencies that have all this type of information you'll need in an emergency.
Great, thank you. John, what's your big advice?
Okay, number one, couch what you're doing in terms of community pride minded. You know, that kind of thing is so, it really brings people together. Come up with a cool term like Sonoma Strong. We're going to crush this together, you know. Number two, you know, I'd say try to look for ways to engage the community in discussions around the 3 modes and the you know, those hubs that we were talking about earlier. Find out what communities need in the 3 hubs that aren't, or the 3 modes that isn't covered by something else, and then do the work to try to figure out what the libraries can provide that isn't there already, and then start reaching out. And the third thing is knowing more about all of that will be really helpful when you actually do pick up the phone, show up at a meeting, or get asked a question related to resilience and preparedness. You'll make a bigger impact in that moment and with that connection.
Oh, thank you. That's wise words. Sarah, give us a gem.
So, you know, obviously I'm coming from a building perspective. I'm the facilities manager of the group. I don't have a libraries background. So my advice is find out who your building person is. Who is that person that when you are going to set up a local assistance center, or if there is a fire like Irma talked about and you don't have air conditioning, know who that person is. If you have building needs, know who they are, have a relationship with them, be ready to work alongside them, because when you need that second response, they're going to come in like a tornado, and it's important that you've worked through who's going where, what do you need, what can we move, how can we help before the emergency. So know your facilities people or your real estate people, know your utilities people, build those partnerships with them, and know who your emergency response people are. Who are the people that are calling the shots during that emergency? Because you need to advocate for your library to those people.
Absolutely, you have to be at the table. Yeah. So do we have some time for questions, William, from the chat?
We do, and just wanted to say thank you so much to everyone who's been adding to the chat. There's been some really fantastic suggestions there, also stories from different libraries. Thank you especially to Christian Burns, who's sharing what's going on in LA County, Bev Schwartzberg for, of course, for the perspective from the State Library, as well as Karen from Moreno Valley, I believe that's where you're from. And just really appreciate all that. So if you haven't been into the chat, please take a look, because there's a wealth of resources and suggestions there. And one question that was asked, I think it was Yolanda had asked about how libraries can sort of better support staff and volunteers. So during your recent disaster experiences, how have your libraries, provided either services or support to staff as they've, themselves navigated these emergencies?
So Sarah, John, or Irma, you want to give your insight to that?
Yeah, I can start. I think my experience was I was probably 6 months into a new job, and I didn't know the staff as well as the staff knew each other. So when there was an emergency, I could get contacted one person and they were able to reach out to other people. So it's really sort of having that print list of phone numbers of your staff and knowing who lives where, because there's different areas that around the county that people were impacted. So I think that was the important thing, is to know your staff, have your information readily with you, available in a case of an emergency.
Great. William, do we have another question that we can give to another one of our panelists?
Absolutely. So Sarah had mentioned something that I think really resonated with me based on what we've heard from other libraries, but sort of the library being that unique second responder, and thinking about, you know, there are these waves of support that the library is well positioned. And just curious to that end about knowing sort of what where the library can best fill in. I think Sarah, you and John both mentioned that. In your mind, what is the library's unique role, and what should folks be thinking about as sort of the thing that the library sort of brings that other maybe organizations in the community aren't able to?
Yeah, so when I think about what we provide during that second response, it's really being that gathering point. We have the space, we have the information. So what's really important to note is that the library staff do not operate the LAC, we host it. So what we have the benefit of doing is, while everybody else is sitting at a table, getting all the nitty gritty with people, we can be there and kind of be that softer touch. We can be providing the, what we do so well, right? The information and just talking with our community and just kind of being there to support them, while also physically hosting in our branch.
So William, do we have time for one more question for Irma?
We do.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great.
Absolutely. Sorry, Dennis, did you have a question or do you want me to pull one?
Well, I was wondering if there's in the chat, if there's something that you see.
One that actually, so I've been gathering them as we've gone. One that actually just came through, so thank you, Deborah, was about how can sort of friends of the library's quote unquote civilian supporters, how can they help, and how can we bring them on board? Because of course we know that there are many groups, right, that care deeply about the library. You know, Irma is starting us off, and if we have time, everyone else, how can folks better bring in those groups like the Friends of the Library?
I think it's, as we talked before, is leveraging those connections that you have with your friends groups, because they're friends, because they appreciate the library. And so knowing how to maybe be able to contact them, of course, knowing in your library, if you need to evacuate, what things that need to be evacuated, how you can get people in the community out to help you. I think that's it's just the connection that you have with the friends and your library board or whomever it is, to make sure that they are there to help you, because so often you're going to just need that information. You're going to need people to come out and help you. And the friends are the ones who are always very good about getting the rest of the community members out to help you. So it's having those pre-connections. It's you know, you can't sort of connect with your friends and your board if you haven't been doing it all you know. And then also getting that, make sure that they talk about how it's important for the things for their emergency, for the emergency in the library, if they're in there, keep them as part of the conversation. I like that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Irma. So if your current disaster plan is this, when in danger, when in doubt, run around, scream and shout. So hopefully this has been helpful to you. And I think we're going to hear, are we going to go to Todd now, or?
We actually we're doing really well on time, which is
good.
Fantastic. And so we actually have time for a couple more questions. If you have a question that you'd like the panelists to respond to, please feel free to add it now to the chat, because we can add it in after this next one. And just again, thank you so much to all the panelists. You've been really fantastic responses and really helpful information. And one had to do with, you know, Sarah mentioned the library sort of needing to put itself or have a seat at the table, which we've heard from a lot of libraries, that, you know, the library in some ways in a disaster benefits from its unique position in the community, that, you know, library staff may not be you know, pulled away necessarily, depending on the county's relationship. They may not always be asked to serve in the EOC like other staff might be. They may not be, because of, as John said, being a JPA library, they may not even be designated disaster workers. But if libraries are interested in having that seat at the table, Sarah, what advice would you have from them about how to approach other organizations and how to build those partnerships?
Be aggressive, get out there. I mean, we are the passionate beating heart of our community. And, I think there's this idea that as the library, we're still quiet and we're reading books. No, libraries are loud. We are the center of the community. We're providing resources to so many people in the community. And I think it's important to remind, our counterparts in other departments or municipalities or divisions that libraries are an integral part of the community, and having that passion and saying, here's what we can provide, here's who we are, here's how we can help. There is so much that we can do for our neighbors, and I think it's just a matter of getting out there and contacting your utility companies, whether it's your library director, or if you have a facilities manager or something like that, a real property person, whoever it is that basically manages that portfolio. Start making those partnerships, get out there, tell them why we're so amazing, and all the awesome work that we're doing for our communities. That will resonate with them. I mean, you can't argue with that.
And libraries have such a good reputation anyway. People love the library. So I say utilize that. So I used to tell our board of supervisors, the library is probably the one department in the county that people go to because they want to, not because they have to. So use that goodwill. So do we have time for another question?
We do. And then what we want to do, sorry, I'm just quickly checking the time. I'll do one final question to John, if that's okay. And then we'll have a quick just chance to wrap up and ask all the panelists to share one final thought.
Well, and we're going to hear from Todd, right?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, no, don't we don't want to forget about Todd.
Yeah.
Love Todd. And so one was, John, you mentioned, kind of the idea of resilience in the library as a hub. That's something that within many different library communities, folks have talked about, both as library as sort of a social service hub, as a community hub. Could you tell us just a little bit more about, in your mind, what that would look like if the library were to be, really focusing on community resilience?
Yeah, I mean, it always goes back to the mode. So I think in an ideal situation, you'd have it pretty well figured out, what are community needs in normal times, what are community needs in crisis mode, when there are things that are happening that are, out of our control. What does it look like? What are community needs in a recovery time when they're trying to come back together and feel better after the event? And then not only do you kind of need to have, we want to provide what people need, but there are a lot of resources in the community. And so having again, working on that trust angle, the fact that people trust the library, I think they're going to, if you have the resources there, show up at that location. And I would just say that it all goes back to the partnerships again, because what you need is that when a crisis mode starts, there's a button to push or a lever, and immediately you put that protocol in and you have that ready. And that is what people find when they go to the library during those times.
Excellent. Thank you so much, John. And just in closing, Sarah and Irma, just if you wouldn't mind adding, is there anything that in closing that we didn't cover today that you'd like to mention, or any closing thoughts for folks as they think about their own library preparedness efforts?
I would just say start building your team now. It doesn't have to be, oh, well, it's just this person or that person, or it has to be a director. You really just need a team of people who are willing to pick up the phone, come up with a plan. For us in particular in San Diego, we have our SERP binders, which are, basically emergency binders. Every single branch gets trained a couple times a year, and we go through that SERP binder where, hey, whatever the disaster is, heat advisory, earthquake, power outage, there is a tab in that binder, and those people know exactly who to call, exactly what to do. You got to know your team. You got to be prepared. Exactly like John's saying, when the disaster strikes, you should already know exactly what button to push and who's the right person to call.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Irma, any closing thoughts for the group?
Yeah. Also make sure that the staff knows what resources are out there. After this happened, We had someone from 211 come talk to us about all the different resources that were available. A lot of staff didn't know those things. So I think it's just time to take time when you're making those partnerships. Also understand, because we're information professionals, is what kind of things do we have in our community that can help us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to everyone. And Janice, anything you wanted to share just in closing?
Yeah, I just think it's so great to get all this wisdom and experience in one place. And I'm just really grateful for everybody showing up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think now we'll go to Todd Deck, who's the Tehama County Librarian.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, William. You know, I think participating in this and just seeing this project is really just amazing, because this started really as at a NorthNet meeting. We had a speaker cancel, and a bunch of librarians in January just kind of started talking about their experiences around disaster. So it's really excited to see now this layer of it and getting these different experiences. I think that this conversation is an example of removing silos and broadening the conversation. And I have written down, contact my PG&E rep right now, and I'll be doing that next. So the only other thing that really blew my mind. So thank you for that, Sarah. The only thing that I would just encourage is the website. The Recovery Together website is really a fantastic resource to familiarize yourself with and really share it with your teams. And really, for that professional development time, you know, really encourage them to use that, because there's a lot there, but it's in a very easy to digest format. So, and I just really appreciate everybody, you know, participating in this. It's great to see.
Thank you so much. And to that end, too, that we want this to be, of course, NLS wants it to be a resource for the entire statewide community and beyond. We've got a lot of interest actually in this project from outside the state, as folks have kind of turned their eyes to California in the last several months. And so if you have a story that you can share, a resource, this is the image you see here is of the latest posts. Please feel free to email me. My email address is located here. You can also reach out to Jackie Brinkley at NLS. If your library, as we said, is interested in collaborating, please feel free to contact Jackie. A lot of libraries within the region are really eager to share. And you know, the one positive that's come out of all of the challenges that have been faced over the last several months, the last several years, is that it is bringing people together. And we know anything, it's that, you know, libraries are stronger when they're working together. So thank you so much for all that. Jackie, in closing.
Thank you very much for everyone being here today. I just wanted to let you know I'm trying to post the survey in the chat, but I'm going to be sending it out to everyone. Oh, I'm so sorry. There, it's in the chat now. So thank you to everybody. The panelists, you are all just great. You give such great information, and to the team, to the Common Knowledge team, and Janice and Todd, thanks so much. This has just been a really valuable hour. And to all the participants, we will send you a recording, a link to the recording, and also the edited chat notes for your reference. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll be signing off now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you.